Today, we are diving into one of the greatest underdog stories in all of history, the American Revolutionary War. It's the absolutely epic tale of how 13 colonies, really just a patchwork of farmers, merchants, and thinkers, decided to square off against the British Empire, the biggest military and economic superpower on the planet at the time, and ended up forging a brand new nation. But that's the real question, isn't it? How did they actually do it? How in the world did a fledgling army, an army that was often starving and hadn't been paid, manage to outmaneuver and outlast the most disciplined professional fighting force of the 18th century? Well, that's the big question we're going to answer as we walk through this incredible story. All right, let's get into it. Here's our game plan. We're going to start with those first sparks of rebellion, see how that exploded into a full-blown war for independence, then look at the brutal struggle just to survive. After that, we'll see how the whole world got involved, witness that final, stunning victory, and then we'll unpack the complicated legacy it all left behind. So our story really kicks off after another war, the 7 Years' War. Britain won, big time, but they were also broke. I mean, deeply in debt. And to pay for defending the American colonies, Parliament had an idea. Let's get the colonists to foot the bill. And, well, that decision created the perfect storm for a revolution. You know, what's just wild to see on this timeline is how fast everything spiraled out of control. We're talking about a single decade. In 1765, it's outrage over attacks on paper. By 1770, you've got British soldiers firing on civilians in Boston. Then comes the Boston Tea Party, Parliament hits back with the Intolerable Acts, and boom, by 1775, shots are fired at Lexington and Concord. The war had begun. But you've got to understand, this was never just about the price of stamps or tea. At its very heart, it was about one single powerful idea: no taxation without representation. The colonists' argument was pretty straightforward. Hey, we don't get to vote for anyone in Parliament, so you have no right to reach into our pockets. To them, it wasn't just unfair, it was a violation of their basic rights. So, with blood being shed, this wasn't just a protest anymore. It was a war. But it's super important to remember, this was not a simple America versus Britain situation. The very idea of breaking away from England completely split colonial society right down the middle. Yeah, the colonies were anything but united. You had the Patriots, who were all in on independence, making up about 40% of the people. But then you had the Loyalists, a solid 20% who were loyal to the king. And the other 40%? They were just trying to stay out of it, to not pick a side. This means the revolution was also a bitter civil war, where neighbors and even families fought against each other. And then came the moment that changed everything. July 4th, 1776, the Declaration of Independence. This document took the conflict and elevated it. Suddenly, it wasn't a squabble over taxes anymore. This was a war for a completely new kind of country, founded on this really radical idea that people should govern themselves. Okay, so declaring independence is one thing. Actually winning it on the battlefield, that's a whole other story. In those early years, the brand new Continental Army, led by George Washington, was just getting hammered. The whole cause was hanging on by a thread. I mean, by late 1776, things looked absolutely hopeless. The British Army captured New York City, and Washington's army was just shattered. His force dwindled to less than 5,000 men. Honestly, for most people watching, it really looked like the revolution was over before it had even begun. But then, Washington pulls off one of the most daring, legendary moves in all of military history. On a freezing Christmas night, he leads his exhausted troops across the icy Delaware River for a surprise attack. That victory at Trenton and another one right after at Princeton, militarily they were small, but for morale, they were gigantic. It was the shot of adrenaline that literally saved the revolution from freezing to death. Those surprise victories proved that the Americans weren't just going to roll over. And that kind of resilience started getting attention from Britain's biggest rival, France. The French saw a golden opportunity to get some revenge and weaken the British Empire, and their entry turned this colonial rebellion into a full-blown world war. So here's how we get to that crucial French alliance. The absolute turning point was the stunning American victory at Saratoga in 1777. An entire British army was forced to surrender. This was the proof France needed that the Americans might actually win. So in 1778, they signed the treaty, and just like that, Britain had a massive global war on its hands. But even with help on the way, the Continental Army had to endure its darkest, most brutal winter. At Valley Forge, about 2,000 soldiers died, not from battle, but from disease, from starvation, from the freezing cold. It's just a testament to their unbelievable grit that the army didn't completely fall apart right then and there. But that sacrifice paid off. The French alliance was a total game changer. It gave the Americans everything they were desperate for: money, weapons, professional soldiers, and maybe most important of all, a powerful navy. Suddenly, Britain couldn't just sail up and down the coast doing whatever it wanted. With the French Navy in the fight, the whole strategic chessboard shifted. The war's final act wasn't going to be fought up north. Instead, everything was heading south, where the brand new Franco-American alliance was about to set the perfect trap. And this right here is the checkmate moment. In 1781, the British General Cornwallis positioned his army at Yorktown, Virginia. He was expecting the British Navy to come resupply him or pull him out. Big mistake. The French fleet showed up instead and blockaded the coast, cutting off his only escape route. At the same time, Washington's and Rochambeau's armies trapped him by land. He was completely surrounded. Game over. 2 years later, it was all made official with the Treaty of Paris. Great Britain recognized the United States as a free and independent nation. The U.S. was granted a massive amount of territory, all the way to the Mississippi River. The impossible had actually happened. If you're inspired by this story of how a nation was forged, help us tell more stories like it by liking this explainer and subscribing to the channel. But the end of the war was not the end of the story. Not by a long shot. Winning independence was one thing. Figuring out what to do next presented a whole new set of challenges and left behind a really complex legacy. Yeah, the revolution's legacy is so incredibly layered. On the one hand, its ideals of liberty inspired people all over the world, in France, in Haiti, everywhere, and it led to the U.S. Constitution. But on the other hand, for many Native American tribes who had sided with the British, it was a total disaster. They lost their land and their power. And of course, there's the deepest contradiction of all, a revolution for liberty that failed to end the institution of slavery, setting the stage for an even bloodier war down the road. So the war secured independence, absolutely, but it left this huge, burning question hanging in the air. Who exactly were those unalienable rights for? Who truly got to enjoy life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness in this new nation? You can explore that very question and so much more in our next explainer, which covers the messy, fascinating early days of the Republic. You can find it right here on our U.S. History playlist. Thanks so much for watching.